Good morning, everyone. We will start our explanatory workshop on the process that will take us to the first regional program for priority setting in Latin America and the Caribbean, organized by the Minor Use Foundation in collaboration with the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, IICA. For IICA, it is strategic to work in collaboration with the Minor Use Foundation in the search for more and better alternatives to pest controls aimed at minor crops. Due to the characteristics and conditions of the Americas, it is strategic to enable the opportunities that can be given to agriculture in the Americas in the area of pest control. In the rural territories throughout Latin America and the Caribbean, food products are produced for more than 800 million persons. 14% of the crops in the world are grown here, and a good part of the global biodiversity, freshwater, and natural forests on the planet are sheltered here. According to 2019 FAO figures, every year up to 40% of some food products or crops worldwide are lost due to plant diseases and pests. This causes annual losses of more than 220 billion US dollars, causing the people to starve and the loss of revenue for the rural communities. These data justify by far each dollar invested in research to provide new alternatives to pest controls. And more so if we consider that these are aimed at minor crops, many of which are produced by small and medium growers. For the event today, we thank each and every one of you for your participation. And our challenge now and our task is to bring in more countries and key individuals into this process. We need for the Americas to be a very proactive actor in the agenda of the foundation, and for this, IICA will support in whatever is within its reach to collaborate with the foundation's work plan. Today, we have an outstanding roster of speakers, all related to the Minor Use Foundation, and we will also hear the experiences of Brazil in the implementation of a national program for minor uses from the official stance and from that of the private sector. I am sure that today will be very useful for all of you, since this is the beginning of a process that we hope is full of participation, ownership, and leadership in the area of minor uses. Before I offer the floor to our moderator for today, Mr. Luis Suguiyama, by the way, very well known by many of you due to his outstanding experience regarding pesticide regulation at the EPA and as an outstanding consultant in the Americas and other regions of the world, I would like to remind you of some logistics information, which is important for our day-to-day. I remind you that the event is being carried out in 3 languages simultaneously, English, Spanish, and Portuguese. So therefore, I beg you, whoever is using the floor, to please speak slowly, so that the interpreters can convey the message as clearly as possible. I hope that you have all selected the language of choice to listen in. If you have not, I remind you that the bottom part of the screen is the language option, and there you can select the language of your preference to listen. Many of the presentations will be presented on the screen in several languages. If you want to see the screen on one given language, go to the upper part of the screen, and in the options section, there is one called View Options. And within that, you will see shared screen. There you will be able to see the three options, one that says Spanish, English, or Portuguese. And you may select the language that you want to see the screen in. I also remind you that this event is being recorded, and you may share the link of this event with colleagues that were unable to be present at this event. Without further ado, I once again thank you all for your participation, and I also thank the Minor Use Foundation. Now I offer the floor to Mr. Luis Suguiyama, who will continue with you acting as moderator of this event. Go ahead, Luis. Thank you very much. Thank you, Eric. Good day to all participants to this workshop, which for me is a very important workshop, not only for the Latin American region, but especially for the participation of Latin America in global programs that will be implemented by the Minor Use Foundation. I am very pleased to be able to moderate this workshop, a workshop, the Inception Workshop, covering matters that have been part of my entire professional life. So I would really like to thank the Minor Use Foundation, IICA, and the IR4 organization for the opportunity to continue working on such important matters as is sustainability of agriculture and food safety, which implies the use of control tools in agriculture. I would just like to mention that there will be a series of presentations to explain the program, the process, and all the activities that will be carried out in forthcoming months, and that will result in a summit to be held, a regional meeting scheduled for September 26 and 27 this year. So it is very important to continue counting on the participation and the interest of each and every one of you as participants in this process. To start this workshop, we will hear a presentation regarding harnessing the power of collaboration to benefit growers and reduce trade barriers. We will be discussing the establishment of maximum residue levels under the Codex. But before this, I would like to indicate that we will have the presentations, and for some of the presentations, there will be a short chance for questions or clarifications that you may have. But please, we are planning on not opening the microphone. There are too many participants on this occasion. But if you have any comments, remarks, or clarifications that you believe are appropriate for the matters, please write those down in the chat. We will screen those, and we may have a session of question and answers at the end. So to start the workshop, let us hear our first speaker, Dr. Dirk Drost, Chair of the Minor Use Foundation. And he will talk about the importance of this project in benefit of producers both in Latin America as well as the Caribbean, even globally, and to facilitate trade in agriculture. Go ahead, Dr. Drost.
Thank you very much, Dr. Suguiyama. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today and to have the opportunity to speak with you about the Minor Use Foundation. We received such a warm welcome from Erick Bolaños from IICA, and as an organization, the Minor Use Foundation, we are grateful for that warm introduction that we received. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to our engagement as we proceed through this pre-inception workshop today. Next slide, please. So I'm the board chairman for the Minor Use Foundation, and pardon me, please. I have a brief technical problem here. I apologize. So I'm the chairman of the board for the Minor Use Foundation, and I'm going to just share with you the highlights of the foundation today. Next slide. So the vision and the mission of the Minor Use Foundation. The foundation exists to assist in providing new technology tools to growers and grower groups for pest control, as was explained by Dr. Suguiyama. To do that, we want to break down trade barriers that sometimes exist due to missing or misaligned maximum residue limits. We also are in the process, with your help over the next several months, of identifying the current priorities that are needed for Latin America and the Caribbean. So we're hoping to uncover, with your help, where the trade barriers exist, which crops, which pesticides, and which maximum residue limits might be limiting your capability and capacity to control pests and trade your minor use commodities. We also are happy to be able to cooperate with IICA. As you heard Erick Bolaños speak about the importance of collaboration and being part of a bigger process, we're pleased to be able to work with IICA as a partner in Latin America and the Caribbean to deliver our mission and vision. Our organization is funded by government groups, by foundations, by other donor organizations. And so we are bringing a new focus and new energy to maximum residue limits and correcting misalignments. So the foundation is a nonprofit, not-for-profit, private foundation, which is based in the United States, but its mission is to work globally. So in the United States, we work through IR4, but globally, we work through organizations that are like-minded, that are interested in satisfying the needs and providing new technologies for growers. Next slide. So there's a bit of information here about our foundation. The most important, I think, is we invite you to visit our website, www.minorusefoundation.org, where you'll find information in French and Spanish and in English. We sponsored a global minor use priority setting meeting in September of 2020. We've also conducted an Asian regional priority setting meeting in December of 2021. And we look forward to conducting a similar meeting for Latin America and the Caribbean late in September of 2022. We also intend to conduct a meeting in Africa, a regional meeting in Africa as well, to gather priorities there. So you'll see that the purpose of all of this is to have a set of priorities that have been established globally, which we hope to discuss further at a meeting in late December of 2023, where we can, again, we hope, health permitting, to allow us to get together in person and set another group of global minor use priorities. Next slide. So I think I've covered this, so we can go to the final slide. And my contact information is on the slide in front of you, and I invite you to reach out to me if you would like to directly, either with either of those telephone numbers or via my email address at the Minor Use Foundation. Once again, welcome to the Pre-Inception Workshop. We're grateful for all of your participation and thankful for the opportunity to work with you today. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Dr. Drost.
Thank you, Dr. Drost. Before we start the next presentation, the term minor use perhaps is not as appropriate for agriculture activities in the Latin American region, because for many of our economies, those minor uses are really of great rural economic and social importance. So please bear in mind that the intention is to select priorities and crops of great importance in our Latin American and Caribbean region. I guess a second presentation, we will now have a presentation split by Anna Gore, currently from the Minor Use Foundation with extensive experience in international development related to agricultural activity, and Verónica Picado, a chemist who is currently an international consultant, but also linked to the Minor Use Foundation. So to start this second part, I would like to introduce Ms. Anna Gore, for her to refer to the activities of the Minor Use Foundation and the priorities and the activities that will be carried out globally. Anna, go ahead.
Thank you, Luis. Hi, everyone. So as Luis said, my name is Anna Gore, and following on Dirk's presentation, I'm going to talk a bit about the Minor Use Foundation's global activities and priorities. Next slide, please. So I wanted to start by sharing some data to look at what an MRL trade barrier really looks like. And here, this is an example from Europe, but this is just one example. There are many examples from all over the world in many different countries. So not to pick too much on the EU, but we're just going to show this data because it's so useful, I think, in understanding what the Minor Use Foundation does. So the European Union has decided to phase out over the next few years several pesticide registrations, and USDA conducted a report to analyze the economic impact of this regulatory change. And so what I'm sharing here is some of the data from that report. And as you can see here, Central and South America are highly affected by these regulatory changes. On the column to the left, you can see the total value of agricultural exports from the region to Europe, which is just over $30 billion. And then in the middle column, you can see that 23 billion of those agricultural exports will be affected by these removal pesticide registrations there, which is almost 80% of the agricultural exports to the region. So I just wanted to give a sense of how massive the impact of MRL trade barriers really can be in the real world. It's quite significant. Next slide, please. And then if we look a little bit deeper and we break this down by commodity, we can see that the specialty crops and minor use crops are disproportionately affected by this removal of pesticide registration. So the blue here represents the commodities that are going to be affected, and the green is the unaffected commodities. So you can see that biggest commodity group export from Latin America to the EU by far is fruits and nuts, with over $18 billion of export, all of which will be losing market access to the EU. You can also see oil seeds and groundnuts, some of which would be considered minor use commodities globally. You can see cocoa here, prepared fruits and vegetables. So the ones, and also coffee, tea, and spices, the bars here that are most blue, that are most affected, are all minor use, considered minor uses in the global sense. And, that's a trend that we see fairly often, that when there are MRL related trade barriers, specialty crops and minor use crops are affected disproportionately. And that's because there aren't as many MRLs, there aren't as many standards for those types of commodities, so that when we do have tools that are removed, there are not many alternatives. And that's because there's just the crop protection companies don't have as much market incentive to invest research and development money into minor use registrations. And that's just sort of economic factors at work. And so that's where the Minor Use Foundation comes in. Next slide, please. So the way the Minor Use Foundation works is we try to address exactly that gap. And so this is the way in which we operate. You can see here on the left, we begin with a priority setting process, which is what we're doing here today. So this is where we begin by identifying which crop chemical combinations are of most significance to the region. And then when we identify our priorities and our crop chemical combinations that we want to try to address, we begin field trials where we work with the crop protection companies to develop a use pattern and a protocol. And we actually go out to the field in country and conduct the trials that we need to get registrations for those pesticides. Then we collate the data into a package, which is then submitted for registration. And ultimately, we submit that data internationally for the establishment of a Codex MRL. Next slide, please. So now I'm just going to walk through that process in a little bit of a different representation here visually. So you can see we start with this online workshop with the selection of global priorities. Next. And then once we have those priorities and we begin to do projects with them, you can see we've got a kickoff meeting here. We've got everybody involved. We've got the crop protection companies, we've got the regulators, we've got the lab technicians, the fields, people that are going to be working in the field. So we've got everybody coming together in a collaborative way. Next slide, please. And then actually in the field, you can see the pesticide being applied. We do the actual trials and then we analyze the results. You can see Michael Braverman there in the lab working on some lab analysis. Next slide, or next, thank you. And then we analyze the results. As I mentioned, here's another picture of some lab work going on and some pesticide application. Next slide. And then finally, we collate that data and we submit it for the establishment of an international standard to Codex. Next slide, please. And then I have one final visual representation of this, which I think it kind of shows it a different way, which highlights some other important points here. Advance the slide, please. So we start in the region as we are today with the growers and all of the relevant parties to understand the priorities for minor uses. Next, advance the slide, please. We do the same thing in Africa and Southeast Asia as well. So we're working across the world to identify grower priorities for minor uses. And then we, yeah, thank you, keep going there. Yeah, okay, just stop there for a sec. And so then we do the trials, we generate the data in the 3 regions that I mentioned, and then we collate it here in the Minor Use Foundation. We put it together, working with the crop protection companies, into a data package that then goes, advance the slide one more time. Thank you. Goes to JMPR that reviews the data and makes a recommendation to the Codex Committee on Pesticide Residues for the establishment of a Codex MRL. And so just a couple points I wanted to make here on this slide. One thing that the Minor Use Foundation can do by working in all 3 of these regions is connect the dots across them. So, we can see where we have shared minor use priorities across regions, and we can leverage data generated in other regions for the establishment of a Codex MRL. So maybe we'll take a couple trials done in one region, we'll combine them with trials done in another region. So we are helping lower the barrier of entry for any particular crop chemical combination by leveraging all the data from around the world. And then the final thing is we're helping make Codex more representative. So Codex naturally tends to overly represent, Europe, the United States, Australia, New Zealand, some of the highly developed markets. And it doesn't necessarily represent a lot of these minor use commodities. And so we're helping Codex have a more representative standards for all of the global commodities grown around the world. And also helping these regions that are generating the data for Codex more actively participate in the Codex standard process, and then actively participate more as well in CCPR and in Codex in general. So that's just an overview of the Minor Use Foundation. And as Dirk said, I'm so thrilled to be with you all here today and really looking forward to the discussion. Thank you. And the last slide is my contact information.
Muchas
And now I think
gracias.
Veronica. Okay, yeah, please go ahead.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for providing this overview of the Minor Use Foundation. And now I will give the floor to Verónica Picado. She is a chemist and she will be describing the incorporation by Latin America and of Latin America and the Caribbean within this global program for the Minor Use Foundation. Go ahead, Veronica, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Luis. Thank you very much, Ana. We will be having a discussion on what we've been working on in Latin America. Next slide, please. As many of you probably remember, and probably several of the countries that are participating here know this, in 2012, 2013, we started a project within the context of STDF with the support of the United States, and in order to build capacities in Latin America. I'm sorry, the speaker has muted her microphone. I apologize. So we will be discussing briefly what we have been working on over the years in Latin America. So in 2012, 2013, we started a project within the framework of the STDF and with the support of IR4 in the United States. We had the participation of several countries in the region, many of them present in this meeting today. The idea was to build capacities in field trials to send that data package to the Codex Alimentarius and therefore create new tolerances. Next slide, please. As a result of this project that involved the participation of Costa Rica, Bolivia, Colombia, Panama, and other countries, we obtained an MRL for avocado with spineteram and for pineapple with pyriproxyfen. Next slide, please. After this project, the foundation was created, and this first group, this first generation, which included the STDF project, has been ongoing, and the countries have become partners of the Minor Use Foundation and are currently implementing different projects generating data for the Codex. We can mention spineteram for banana, worked by Colombia and Panama, pineapple spineteram with Bolivia, Colombia, Panama, and Ecuador, fluopiram for papaya, and that was developed by Costa Rica together with Peru, and a second part for trifloxystrobin by those countries as well. There's one for passion fruit and coffee with indoxacarb and sulfoxaflor. These are in their last stages of development. Some are more in early stages or beginning the process, but they finished the field trials and they are developing the lab part of the process. Next slide, please.
We also have projects that will be starting at the end of 2022 and the beginning of 2023. We hope to start projects for mango with picoxystrobin, spinetoram for pitahaya, and pineapple with ethaboxam. We're having a new partner, which is Argentina. You can see this in the slide, and we are expecting to have about 6 trials for Argentina. In mango, it would be 2 trials, 3 in Ecuador for pitahaya, and in Costa Rica and Ecuador, we hope to have either 6 or 4 trials. So if you or any of you are interested in participating in these 6 trials, we are more than willing to listen to any suggestions. We have future priorities established in our website. As Dirk mentioned this at the beginning, you can visit this website. What's most important for us is for you to become familiar with the website and locate all of the information that we're describing here and find other priorities as well, or maybe a partner to conduct a field trial or an association with the industry to develop the data package and send it to the Codex. So you are warmly invited, of course, to become part of our foundation. Next slide, please. Before I conclude, I would like to describe other efforts that are being developed together with IICA and with the USDA, and it involves the creation of a training center. This is a project that we are developing with the University of Columbia to have a training center in the region where our technical experts can go and learn how to conduct those field trials as well as analyze them in the laboratory under the good laboratory practices. Next slide, please. This is my contact information. With this invitation, let me remind you that we are here today to expand and update this list of future priorities. So any suggestions that you may have are more than welcome, and we can start this process today. Thank you. Thank you, Veronica. I think we're having an excellent meeting, but it's a bit too serious. So let me lighten up the mood a little bit with this comment. Maybe I'll get a smile from all of you since we're all here. I had asked IICA to have Japanese interpretation, but unfortunately they turned me down. So we only have Spanish and Portuguese and English. I apologize for that. Anyway, I was able to steal a smile, so it is now my pleasure to introduce a program that a neighboring country, Brazil, created a few years ago, and we have actually extended the invitation as well to engineer Rogerio Pereira Da Silva, who is the manager or director of the minor use program, which was established in the Ministry of Agriculture of Brazil. He will be sharing with all of us the benefits of putting together a minor use program, and with special emphasis in the adoption of biopesticides in integrated pest management programs. I would also like to invite Tom Prado, who is the CEO of Itaueira Agropecuária in Brazil, and who is also a member of the board of the minor use program in Brazil. Mr. Pereira da Silva, you have the floor, and welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this invitation. I will be sharing this presentation with Tom Prado. Tom Prado is also a representative of the National Confederation of Agriculture here in Brazil. For me, it is a true pleasure to be here, and I will be discussing the benefits of increasing the availability of biopesticides for minor crops. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. I will be discussing the mission of the Ministry of Agriculture. The mission of this ministry is to promote the sustainable development of agricultural production chains for the benefit of Brazilian society. This program has the goal of making available products for the use of those who produce minor crops and have a better development. Next slide, please. The regulations for minor crops in Brazil was based on the Codex Alimentarius, the OECD, and in the regulations of Canada and the US. The legislation establishes groups of crops for the purpose of extrapolating data from major crops to minor crops. These groups are defined based on the consumption and the characteristics, the botanical characteristics for agricultural practices. Next slide, please. Here in Brazil, we have a committee which is focused on minor crops. And let me tell you, actually, that this committee is an initiative that has proven very interesting because of many reasons. This is like a task force that was the result of an initiative of the farm sector, which aggregates the institutions that represent research, agrochemical, and biological producers and government. This committee discusses the demands of the sector regarding minor crops. And it brings together all of the stakeholders to identify what must be done with regards to the assets that need to be prioritized, as well as the needs of the sector. It is my belief that all countries have to do something similar, because it is a way of involving the different sectors together in order to address these needs. Here, I will show you one of the benefits of the increased access to minor crops regarding pesticides and biopesticides for all stakeholders. This slide specifically shows the fact that the substances or the amount of substances that were approved for organic agriculture. In this case, specifically, it is very interesting to note that the products that are approved for organic agriculture are developed for a biological purpose, that is pests. Here we have something very interesting, which is the following. All of these biopesticides, which are approved for organic agriculture, are allowed or permitted directly for all minor crops. This means that by increasing the amount of biopesticides, we therefore multiply or increase exponentially the amount of substances that can be used in minor crops. This is because they are authorized and considering, of course, the goal of or their purpose. Now, let me discuss the benefits of increased access to minor crops and pesticides and biopesticides. For farmers, the benefits include increasing the efficiency of the activity and also improves the chances to access the international market. It also expands income and productivity of the farmers, and also enables the possibility of using more modern and targeted pesticides with more specific goals instead of substances that has a spectrum of use that is more wide. These are more sustainable substances from an environmental perspective. This also reduces the chance of pesticide resistance. Next slide, please. In this case, we have to mention the fact that the benefits do not only reach the farmers, but they also reach consumers at all levels, both internationally and nationally. This is because by increasing the availability of products for farmers, including pesticides and biopesticides, they are also able to produce more affordable and safer foods for the population of the world. Furthermore, the food safety is included together with the quality of those foods. Why? Because these substances undergo a rigorous evaluation and assessment process before they are approved for use. The benefits also are for the chemical and biological industries, because the increase in the availability of substances also increases the amount of farmers who are interested in using this substance, because the crops that are produced, which are minor crops, are included for the use of these substances. And in this way, what happens is that there is a greater possibility of selling more products and therefore reach more clients. In addition to this, at present, the main issue, which has to do with environmental, social, and governance matters, are like a hot topic, if I may say it that way. And what happens is that everything that has to do with a better classification in ESG is very important. And since companies are paying more attention to sustainability, they can contribute to the use of these assets for minor crops, and therefore they are able to improve their own sustainability. Next slide, please. For governments, we also see a benefit of this activity, because with the regulation of minor crops, we can protect the whole of society. By releasing these substances and with their evaluation, we are able to better protect society, and furthermore, we are able to make the decision-making process easier. The reason is that there are assets that are being authorized, and there's certain predictability regarding what can be used and what cannot be used. And this is very good for governments. In addition to this, we are able to develop society as a whole, because we are able to provide more affordable and accessible products for the consumers. And this increases income for farmers, and therefore the society as a whole is further developed. Next slide. This is the end of my presentation, and here you have the information, the contact information, and I remain, of course, at your disposal for any questions that you may have. Let me now give the floor to Tom Prado. Thank you very much.
Boa tarde.
Good afternoon.
Boa tarde a todos.
Good afternoon to everyone.
Eu estou vendo a imagem do Rogério. Não sei se vocês estão vendo a minha imagem.
I am still seeing the image that Rogerio was
E está vendo a minha imagem
projecting. I don't know
também?
if you can see my slide. Yes, can you see my screen?
Ok.
Yes.
Agradecemos o convite em nome da Confederação Nacional da Agropecuária
First,
do
I would like
Brasil.
to thank you
Nossa
for the
primeira
invitation on behalf
participação
of
em
the
eventos internacionais
Agricultural
relacionados a
Confederation of
minor
Brazil.
crops, minor
This
use,
is
se deu
the first time that we
no ano de
participate in
2012,
an
por
international event
ocasião
regarding minor.
do
Actually, this
encontro
is not the first time, but
Global
the first time we
Minor
participated in such
Use
an event was in
Summit
2012
do ano
when we had
2012, em
the
Roma,
Global Minor Use
onde
Summit.
lá nós
This took place in
conhecemos o
2012
Alan
in
Norden,
Rome.
o Dan Kunkel,
When
o Jerry
we went
Veron
there, we were able
e muitos outros,
to meet
e onde
very
nós
important
aprendemos
people,
lá
and
qual era o trabalho que
this
deveria
also
ser
constituted a
liderado por
possibility
produtor
to understand
no
what type
Brasil,
of work was
assim como
being
na América
conducted
Latina
or
e em
had
outros
to be
países,
implemented by
seguindo o exemplo do
producers in
que já era
Brazil, in
feito
Latin
nos Estados
America, and other
Unidos e na
countries
Europa
as
por
well.
outros líderes
This, of course,
empresários, né?
following the examples of was
Então, nós
already
fomos
being
convidados
implemented
naquela
in the
época pelo
United
Ministério
States
da
and Europe.
Agricultura
This
para
was
ajudar nesse
spearheaded by
processo de minor
businessmen
crops.
and other leaders. At the time, the Ministry of
Próximo
Agriculture
slide,
had
por
helped
favor.
us with the process of minor crops. Next slide, please.
E no Brasil, essa força-tarefa, né, esse trabalho conjunto,
In
ele
Brazil,
avançou e hoje ele
these
reúne todos
working
esses
groups
stakeholders aí, todas
moved
essas
forward,
associações
now,
de setor produtivo,
in a
da
way,
parte de
brings
profissionais de
together all of these
pesquisa,
stakeholders,
pessoal
people
das
from the
indústrias,
productive sector,
que são os detentores do registro, né?
and
O governo
this
federal,
includes industries,
o varejo,
research, the federal government, the
no
retail sector
varejo
as
no Brasil,
well.
os supermercados, as revendas de produtos agropecuários, né, dos
This
defensivos,
includes
e o setor
supermarkets, of
produtivo que nós
course, the
representamos, né?
resale
Esse trabalho, essa
sector, and of
apresentação, ela
course the
foi
productive sector
preparada
represented
no
by us.
Brasil pela Federação
This
da
work,
Agricultura do
this
Estado do
presentation was
Paraná,
prepared
que
in
exerce a coordenação
Brazil,
técnica desse comitê no
in
Brasil e que faz parte
an
da
organization
Confederação
in
Nacional
charge
da
of
Agricultura, né?
organizing the
Próximo slide,
technical
por favor.
committee and is part of this confederation. Thank you. Next slide,
Então,
please.
o Comitê de Minor Crops no Brasil, ele tem por objetivo discutir
The
e
Minor
elaborar
Crops
as
Committee in
estratégias,
Brazil
fazer o
has an
levantamento e
objective, which is
encaminhamento
to
de
discuss and
demandas
develop
para o
strategies,
manejo
as
das
well
culturas, para
as
se poder
collecting
usar
and
os
submitting
produtos,
crop
os
control
defensivos agrícolas
claims
nas
and
culturas.
defining alternatives to
É,
extend
se estuda
registration
alternativas para a ampliação dos registros,
within
né?
the sector of agriculture.
E já
Also,
foi
the study
explicado pelo
of
Rogério, os
possibilities or
produtos
alternatives
biológicos, no caso do
to
Brasil,
extend the
eles
registration.
tiveram o benefício
In
de haver um único registro
Brazil,
para
we
uma
were
cultura e já
benefited by the
está
fact that there was one single registry for
ampliado
one
esse
crop,
uso para todas as culturas,
and
porque
this use
os
was
legisladores
therefore expanded
brasileiros,
for
o
their
Ministério da
remaining crops.
Agricultura, a
Why?
Anvisa, que
Because
cuida da
in
parte
Brazil,
da
the
saúde,
legislators, the
e o
Ministry of
IBAMA, que
Agriculture,
cuida do
and
meio ambiente,
Anvisa,
entenderam que como
in
os produtos
charge
biológicos
of
não têm
health,
resíduo
and IBAMA,
de
in charge
nenhum
of the
ingrediente
environment,
ativo
understood that since biological products
químico,
have no
então
residues
por
of
este
active
motivo não
ingredients
precisaria
or
fazer
chemicals,
um
for
registro
this
cultura
reason,
por
it
cultura, como é
wouldn't be
comum nos
necessary
defensivos
to
químicos, né?
have
Então isso foi um
a
grande benefício
registration
que
crop
decorreu
by crop,
depois que o
as
processo de
happens
minor
with the
crops, com a
chemical
participação
products.
privada junto com
This
os
was a
3
benefit
órgãos do governo brasileiro
a
avançou.
result of a
Próximo,
long
por favor.
minor crops process, which included the participation of the Brazilian public sector.
Essas são as entidades que
please.
atualmente fazem parte desse
These
trabalho
are
conjunto.
the
Então, envolve
entities
uma
which
série
are
de
currently
entidades
part
de
of this
produtores,
joint
né?
work.
Tem várias delas. Eu não vou nominar cada uma, porque
This
na realidade já está
includes
escrito e é mais interno do Brasil, né?
producers,
Para a
and I will
gente
not name
poder
all the
caminhar com a
organizations because you can
apresentação.
see them
Mas
here
tem
on
também
the
os órgãos de
screen.
pesquisa, a
This is
Embrapa,
just
o
internal to
Ministério da
Brazil,
Saúde
but
na Anvisa, o
we
do Meio Ambiente
have
no IBAMA, o Ministério da Agricultura, né? O
research
Sindicato das
organizations
Indústrias,
such as
a Crop
Embrapa,
Life
we
Brasil,
have the
que
Ministry of
antes não
Agriculture, we
existia
have
Crop Life no
IBAMA, we have
Brasil,
Crop
antes
Life
era só
Brazil.
Crop. Sim,
Tom, I think you need to select the Portuguese channel because they're hearing the English and the Portuguese at the same level. So Tom, can you please select Portuguese?
onde haço la selección.
Where do I select that? In the lower part of your screen, you will find an icon that reads interpretation. It looks like a globe. If you select that options, you will see either
Pero em
English,
mi
Portuguese,
computador no
or
hay
Spanish.
la opción de
But
selección
I don't see the
de
option
audio.
in my computer.
Pois é, no meu computador não tem a mãozinha levantada.
Tal vez si dejamos de compartir un momento.
Maybe stop sharing your screen just for 1 minute.
Leva esse celular de quem é o dono, porque ele está tocando aqui só.
Now, can you see the icon that reads share screen? Right next to it, there's like a globe. Can you see it?
Lo siento, pero acá en mi computador no aparece la opción de selección.
There is no such option here. I apologize.
Me entende?
Ô, Tom, quando você passa o mouse por cima,
Tom.
ele fica escondido. Se você tira o mouse, ele esconde. Se você
It's
passar o
hidden.
mouse por
You
cima,
have
ele
to
aparece.
find
Talvez
it.
pode ser
Mas
isso.
If you go
eu devo
to
passar
the
por cima do
mouse,
quê? Para poder eu entender.
will
Coloca o
appear.
mouse para baixo da tela. Aí, quando você colocar na parte inferior da tela,
The mouse has to be taken to the lower part of the screen, and there you will find
Eu vou
a
te dizer o que
toolbar
aparece no meu.
with
Ele
all of
aparece
the
o
information,
microfone, ele
including
aparece a câmera de vídeo, os
Now I have a
participantes, o chat
microphone,
e
I
o
have the
share.
video
Isso é o que
camera,
aparece no meu
participants,
computador.
chat, and that's all I see.
En la opción más.
Don't you have an option that reads more?
Infelizmente, eu não posso ajudar porque não aparece a opção no
Unfortunately,
meu computador.
I don't see that option.
Aí vocês me dizem se eu continuo em português, se querem que eu fale em inglês.
Let me see, maybe I can speak in English. If I continue in
Como
Portuguese, what should
prefere.
I do?
Usted puede continuar en portugués.
Maria, I think that
y los
he can
demás
continue in
canales,
Portuguese.
dan a la opción
And the other
cancelar
channels should
silenciar el audio
choose
original.
mute original audio. I think it should work that way. Okay, continue. You can continue in
Sim,
the language of your
graças.
choice.
Lo siento por... Bom, lamento não poder ajudar com a seleção de áudio, mas é o
I'm
que eu
sorry
tenho no
that
meu
I cannot
computador
help
aqui,
with the
não
audio
aparece a opção.
selection, but there is no such option here
Bom,
in my computer.
voltando, continuando então, tem as
So,
instituições que fazem parte
go back to
no Brasil do
presentation. These
do
are the
Comitê de Minor
institutions
Crops. Eu
that are
estava
part
citando a
of
Crop
the
Life
Minor Crops
Brasil,
Committee in
que
Brazil.
antes não existia no Brasil, né?
Crop
Só
Life
existia
Brazil, as I was
internacional.
saying before,
Infelizmente,
did not exist
ela veio para
before
o Brasil,
and
foi
in Brazil. It
inclusive uma
only existed
solicitação nossa,
internationally.
porque a gente entende o papel da Crop
Fortunately,
Life
it
internacional
arrived in
e eu acho que
Brazil,
agregou a vinda
and
dela para o Brasil
this was the
também.
result of our request.
E temos as
Part
entidades
of
das
Crop
indústrias,
Life
que é o
International.
Sindiveg e ainda o
I think
Unifito,
this was a
das
very good thing.
revendas de
And
defensivos químicos, que
we
é a
also
Andável,
have
e
resale,
a Abras, que é a Associação
the
Brasileira
resale
de
sector,
Supermercados.
and
Próximo,
it
por favor.
also has, we also have Abras. Abras is an association that brings together the supermarkets of Brazil. Next slide.
os resultados, né? Nós tivemos a integração do setor,
As a result, we
os
have the integration
produtores,
of the sector.
pesquisa,
We
indústria,
have
governo, as
producers,
revendas de
research, we have
agroquímicos
industry,
e o
government,
setor de
agrochemical
supermercados,
resellers,
né?
and also, of course, the
Os
retail
comitês
sector.
de cultivos, nós temos 43 comitês,
We also have
43
crop
culturas
committees.
diferentes representadas, com mais de 250 participantes
These are
desses grupos todos,
represented by
com a
more than
representação de
250
abrangência
participants,
nacional.
these crop committees, and
Próximo.
this includes all of these groups and with national scope.
Os resultados alcançados, né? Foram feitos levantamentos de demandas de produtos
I would like to show you the
defensivos
results.
agrícolas para
This
88
included a
cultivos.
survey of the different
Desses
products
88
for
cultivos,
88
nós
crops.
tivemos
And out of these
solicitação
88
de
crops,
registro de extensão de uso
we had
para
a request
2.111
for registration
demandas.
for 2,111
Dessas
statements
2.111,
of demand.
95
And
produtos
out of these
formulados foram registrados,
2,111,
237 foram registrados para o cultivo, mas falta incluir
237
o
were
objetivo
registered
biológico
for crops,
da cultura,
but they did not
mas
include the
pelo fato de já
biological
estar
objective.
registrado pelo menos para o cultivo, já traz regularidade se aparecer algum resíduo de produto em alguma
Only registered for the
fiscalização.
crop, it creates like
Faltam
a regular process
1.779
if
demandas serem
if
atendidas.
they were to find
né?
residue of the product.
Essas
We
análises
still
que estão
have to
pendentes,
address
elas foram
1,779
realizadas recentemente,
claims,
de
and
janeiro a
these
novembro de
analyses that
2021,
are pending
e nós
were
temos
conducted
35
recently
empresas,
between January
indústrias
and November
químicas, né, de
2021.
defensivos que
We
estão
have 35
participando da
companies
análise
of the
desse levantamento
chemical
dessa demanda, né,
products
de janeiro
industry,
a maio
which are
agora de
participating in this
2022,
analysis and
para
this survey
elas
to
responderem a
define
essas
demand.
demandas,
Between
dizendo se
January
vão
and
ou
May
não atender
2022, they will be
e
developing a
eventualmente, as
process
que
to
elas não
respond to
forem
these
atender, o
demands, and they
governo
will
vai
be
procurar dar uma
explaining to
solução
us
para aquelas que elas não responderem positivamente.
this process.
Próximo, por
If
favor.
no solution is reached, the government will be addressing when there is no positive response.
Aí tem um resumo, né, da evolução desde
Here
2012,
we
né,
have a
que foi
summary
quando houve
of
a
the
participação
evolution.
no Global Minor Use Summit
In 2012,
em
where we
Roma, né, na
participated
FAO.
in the Global Minor Use
Em
Summit in Rome.
2014 foi quando surgiu a lei
In 2014,
no Brasil, que conseguiu fazer com que
there was a
avançassem os
law
registros no Brasil
enacted
desde
in Brazil
2014, com
to
maior
ensure
velocidade,
registration
que
continued
culminou
in
então
Brazil.
até 2022,
This
até
picked up
maio
in 2014, and then
deste
until
ano, nós estamos
2022,
então com
May 2022
317
this year,
marcas comerciais
we
registradas,
have 317
baseadas nessa lei
trademarks
2014,
registered
de 2014.
based on this law
Instrução Normativa Conjunta número 1
of
de
2014.
2014.
So this is the
Próximo, por favor.
situation or the resolution from 2014. Next slide.
Aí está o nosso contato, né?
Well,
E
here is our
sendo
contact information.
necessário, se precisarem, a gente pode contribuir com alguma
If
resposta de alguma
necessary,
pergunta
we
que seja necessária.
could give
Queria agradecer,
answers
em nome do Brasil,
to
a
any
todos os que
questions. So I
fizeram
would like to thank
funcionar
everyone on
esses
behalf
grupos
of
de
Brazil,
minor
all
uses
those
no mundo
that
inteiro e que
made
muito
these
ajudaram a gente a
minor
evoluir no
use
Brasil
groups
nesses últimos
work
10 anos.
worldwide and that
Muito
have been
obrigado.
so helpful to evolve in Brazil over the last 10 years. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Mr. Prado, Engineer Pereira. The importance of Tom Prado's participation. He is himself is a farmer. I could hear him very well, a bit of echo, but I did not have problem listening to his presentation and comments. Once again, to make you smile, I hope your laptop is not the Suguiyama brand, by the way. Okay, we have a few minutes before we enter into the second part, which would be the core itself of this workshop. But We have a few minutes, and I believe there are a few very important timely questions, particularly the first one for Engineer Pereira. The question is, in your program in Brazil, what crops do you consider minor crops or minor uses? Thank you for your question. Well, allow me to mention a few that are or could be considered minor crops. Watermelon, melon, avocados, pineapple, cocoa, papaya, basically olives, berries, cashew, figs, beets, carrots, ginger, and many others. The universe of crops in your program is very diverse. Fruits, vegetables, yes. Some herbs, yes. Condiments. But I would imagine the classification of minor uses is different because there are some crops that are considered major crops like soy, wheat, corn, maize, and the rest would be considered specialty crops or denominated minor crops. Well, thank you very much. Excuse me. Go ahead. In fact, yes, allow me to mention another example. Maize, as you mentioned. This is a major crop, yes, no doubt. Maize data can be used to extrapolate to minor crops, as a sorghum, for example. Okay, very interesting. Thank you. Thank you. There are a couple of questions and we have a couple more minutes. One responded by my colleague, Dr. Michael, or perhaps Ana Gore or Dr. Drost could answer this. There is a question by Grecia Vega on the source of funding for field trials. I would like to offer the floor to Michael. Perhaps you have a comment about this.
So Luis, this is Dirk Drost.
Okay.
I think we'll briefly address this now and we can follow up in more detail later. So the Minor Use Foundation is funded by a combination of government grants. So we have a government grant from the United States Department of Agriculture, but we also have a government grant from Australia. And in addition to that, we receive funding from the crop protection industry. These funds are unrestricted in terms of they're to support the mission and vision of the Minor Use Foundation. Our goal is to broaden our funding base, both with governments and government grants, as well as with corporations and other foundations, so that we can advance the mission and vision of the Minor Use Foundation. So I'd be happy to discuss it in more detail, one-on-one with different participants, but I think for now, that summarizes our funding sources.
Okay.
And I just wanted to jump in really quickly, Luis, if it's okay. Sorry, I saw that part of the question was on whether we do residue trials or efficacy trials. Is that right? So I just wanted to respond to that aspect of the question. And Michael and Dirk, please weigh in here as well. I believe that we primarily focus on the residue trials for the establishment of MRLs. I see Dirk nodding his head. So I'll just stop there. But if there's anything to add to that, Dirk, please go ahead.
Yes, so we focus mainly on residue trials. I'm having problems with audio, so I'm only on the phone, and I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Michael, te escuchamos bien en la traducción en
Yes,
español.
Michael, we can hear you very well into Portuguese and into Spanish, so no worries.
Go ahead. Por favor, Michael.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yes, I'm having problems with the audio. I don't know if you can hear me. I'm on my phone now into the meeting.
We can hear you, Michael.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, no, I was just going to follow up as Anna Gore mentioned. Yeah, our focus is primarily on residues. So my apologies. I seem to be having some problems with audio. So only on the phone.
No problem. It's clear for me. Thank you. And I
Okay,
believe
thank
that
you.
we should discuss case by case because there are some Latin America countries which we should perform also some efficacy trials or other studies to complement the dossier. And so I believe that we should discuss case by case to check how much we should invest in each case, right? Not only residue trials, but there are some cases that we need to invest more other data.
Our principal, Gaisa, our principal focus is funding residue trials that will result in Codex MRLs. And we look for partners in country to, or companies to work with us to do the necessary efficacy studies because we don't principally support efficacy studies. Thank you.
Ah, okay. Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Okay, muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much. Are there other questions? There are other important questions that I will postpone until after the next presentation. I hope that the next presentation does not have the audio problems. I would like to formally introduce a colleague of mine for many years now, an international expert, Dr. Michael Braverman. And he will present now the process to be followed in forthcoming months to nominate and possibly at the summit of the regional meeting in September 26 and 27. This is a process to select priorities for Latin America and the Caribbean within the global program. So I would like to offer the floor to him. With great pleasure, let me introduce Michael Braverman, an officer of IR4, the IR4 project. Go ahead, Michael.
Thank you very much, Luis. Just so you know, I've been hearing you in Spanish, but I can understand it's my turn to speak. So thank you very much, and good afternoon, good morning to everybody here today. In today's Inception Workshop, we will be covering the topic of the nomination and priority selection process. And this will focus primarily so you can understand how to go through the process and move forward on our way towards the meeting of the final workshop in September. So I work for the IR4 project, which focuses primarily on developing residue data for management of pests in specialty crops. Next slide, please. All right, thank you. So the goal of this workshop is to develop the list of the top pest management needs for Latin America and the Caribbean, but more specifically for this Inception Workshop, we're going to prepare you for the next steps in the process. So a priority is considered a crop pest combination. And overall, there are 4 parts of the process. It includes nominating either existing priorities or submitting new priorities, voting for the top priorities. Those priorities will subsequently be ranked. And then we will hold the workshop to discuss these priorities. All of these slides that I'm going to be presenting to you today, as well as a video of the nomination process, will be posted on the Minor Use Foundation website. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the goal is to develop a list of the top management priorities. And this will take 2 forms. One, nominating existing priorities that come out of the Global Minor Use Workshop list, or you can also nominate new priorities. Next slide, please. So as far as nominating existing priorities, there are over 3,000 priorities on the existing list. And it's important to note that on this out of this list of existing priorities, they will not come up for discussion at the workshop unless you nominate them. So just because you see them on the existing list from the Global Priority Setting Workshop, it still means that you have to nominate them. And the other important thing is that your deadline for nominating priorities is June 14th. Next slide, please. Okay, well, what are some of the factors to consider when you're nominating priorities? Well, whether it's existing priorities or new priorities, you should focus on crop pest combinations with limited control options, but at least there should be some potential solutions. Can you go back, please? Thank you. In other words, when I say potential solutions, I mean pesticides that can control the pest. Secondly, focus on horticultural crops or minor crops rather than agronomic crops. Focus on solutions that do not currently have a Codex MRL on that crop. So if you're looking through potential solutions and you see that that particular combination of pesticide and crop already have a Codex MRL, then we wouldn't really be serving a purpose by pursuing that particular project, because we're trying to generate new Codex MRLs. Also, function on solutions or situations in which currently registered products are causing trade issues or may have some pest resistance problems. Next slide, please. So you may ask, how can I nominate these priorities? Well, if you look at the link that is listed there, that will bring you to the Minor Use Foundation website, and it has pages where you could nominate existing priorities or new priorities. So I'm going to explain how to navigate the process of nominating priorities. Next slide, please. So the first thing that you will see at the top of the page is to see the list of existing priorities. So if you want to nominate priorities, you go to that list and there's the green button that says View Current GMUPL. That's the Global Minor Use Priority List. And that brings up an Excel spreadsheet. So if you find a crop and pest combination that is of interest to you, write down the ID number that is found in column A of the Excel spreadsheet. And then scroll down and enter your name and email and add your country to the nomination form. Next slide, please. Then, based on the ID number that you found in column A of the Excel spreadsheet, enter the ID number in the box where it says Existing Priority ID, and then click the box, and that will automatically fill the rest of the form for you. Next slide, please. And then we want to stop any spammers or people from flooding our mailbox. So please click on I am not a robot, and that you just scroll down on the screen and you will see that. And then click Submit. Next slide, please. So you should get a message back that looks like this, thank you, and that means that you have successfully submitted your priority. So for example, if you were from Brazil and you found priority 4674, which happens to be for management of nematodes on guava, that's what should come up. And then you can nominate another existing priority. So once you develop your list of ID numbers from column A, you can simply go back and nominate another existing priority. Next slide, please. Oh, what about new priorities? Okay, so once you finish getting this particular message, you can decide, well, maybe I'm finished nominating existing priorities and I want to enter a new priority. Well, just click on the section where it says add a new priority. And next slide, please. Okay, so going back to the front, you can click the section where it says click here if you want the form for the new priority. That's another way to get to the new priorities. Next page, please. So this is the form for submitting the new priorities, very similar to nominating the existing priorities. You fill out your name and your email and your country, and then please go to the next slide. And then you click on the common name of the crop. So since this is a new priority, you have to select what type of crop you want. Next slide, please. So after you click on select crop, it will bring down a menu of crops, and you can select from that list of crops by just clicking on that particular crop. Now, let's say you want to, nominate a crop like mate or lulo or jaboticaba. Those kinds of crops are not on our list. So you can scroll down all the way to the bottom and select other. And when you select other, you can enter the name of any crop that you want. Next slide, please. So after you've selected the crop, then you would scroll down and select the target pest. Again, when you click on that target, that will bring up the name of the pests. You can either choose the pest from the list, or again, if your particular pest is not on the list, then you scroll down to the bottom, click Other, and then you can simply type in the name of the pest. Next slide, please. Then as you scroll down, you have to enter whether you want this particular use for the field or the greenhouse. And then what area climate-wise, is it a tropical crop? Is it a temperate crop? And then what discipline? Is it entomology, in other words, for managing insects, plant diseases, etc. Next slide, please. Again, you click on the section that says, I am not a robot. And then you click Review before you submit. And that way you can look over what you've put together for the new priority. Next slide, please. So after you click on the review, that should bring up the information that you put into the system. So if you nominated coconut palm and you nominated nematodes in the field, and all these entries are correct, then the system is working correctly. Next slide, please. And if there's some problem, you can still correct that by clicking the button that says Back to Form. When you go back to the form, you can make any corrections to your entry on the form. If everything is okay, then you click Submit. Next slide, please. Again, similar to the new priority, the existing priorities, when you successfully submit a new priority, you will get a message back that says thank you. And again, you could either continue to nominate existing priorities or submit another new priority. Next slide, please. And once you are finished making your nominations, you can check our database to see if your nominations are actually in our database. So if you click on the URL that is listed there, that will bring up the spreadsheet of the nominated priorities, and you could filter it by column T. So column T lists the emails, and you find where your emails are listed, and that should list all the nominations that you made. So this is just a secondary way to check that all of your nominations have been submitted successfully. Next slide, please. So what happens after you nominate all your priorities? Well, as I mentioned, we need your nominations by June 14th. By June 28th, we expect to send out a cumulative list of all the priorities. you can then look over that cumulative list, and we will be setting up a system for you to vote on those priorities. And the due date for voting will be July 26th. So you'll have a chance for 5 votes. In other words, you'll vote on up to 5 different priorities, and you can rank priorities 1 to 5. So priority 1 is your highest priority, and that will be given the most points. When we add up all the points for a particular priority, we then multiply that by the number of countries voting for that priority, and that will give us the total points. So this focused list will then be divided into fruit and nut crops and agronomic vegetable and herb crops based on the total points. And also for all the nominations and also for the voting, this can only be done by people in the public sector. In other words, not people that are affiliated with the crop protection industry. Next slide, please. So after the voting on June 28th, we're going to be sending out your ranked priorities based on the votes that you submitted. And this is going to be the way that we focus the list of priorities that are actually going to be discussed in the workshop. Next slide, please. So we expect to be able to distribute this ranked list by August 2nd. And at this point, we will encourage input from industry on potential solutions. So industry can look at the ranked priorities, and if you have a potential solution for that crop and pest combination, there will be an online system for you to be able to submit a potential solution. And then we will discuss the merits of the priorities and the solutions at the workshop on the 26th. So in other words, up until August 2nd, all of the decisions will be made purely on crop and pest. Although public sector people can also nominate potential solutions. Next slide, please. So then at this point, we're already ready for the workshop, which will be held on September 26th. And these are some of the factors that we will consider based on the discussion. So again, we will focus on crop pest combinations with limited options, but where there are potential solutions. We'll be focusing on horticultural or minor crops, focus on solutions that do not currently have a Codex MRL. And likewise for industry, if you're nominating a solution, please only nominate solutions that do not have a Codex MRL. Likewise, industry should only be nominating priorities that are not a company objective. Some other factors that we want to consider are how many solutions are already registered on other crops in the countries seeking access to that particular active ingredient. How many countries do registrants support a registration and a label? So our expectation out of the registrants is that if the Minor Use Foundation is supporting residue studies, that the registrant will supply test substance, they will supply GLP standards, and then based on the data, they will pursue a registration in the countries that have been involved, as well as issue a label. Other things to consider are there any residue data for any of the solutions already available so that we can do the number of trials required by Codex without quite as many residue trials. There was a question about efficacy data. So if there's existing efficacy data already out there, that makes it easier to go forward with the project. And is the solution a newer, more effective product that will replace older chemistry and make it through the dietary risk assessment? So we're going to be going into the workshop with ranked priorities, but we will consider many of these points. And then, as it says at the bottom, we'll consider, do these particular factors represent sufficient grounds to justify a change in the rankings? In other words, if we go into the workshop and a particular priority may be priority number 10, but priority number 5 doesn't really have any good solutions, well, we're probably going to lower the ranking on number 5 and increase the rank on number 10 if it has a lot of good solutions and meets a lot of these other criteria. So this will be done by consensus. And our ultimate goal is to at least come out with the top 10 fruit and nut crop priorities, and also the top 10 vegetable and herb priorities. Next, please. So just to sort of recap the nominations and the nomination process that I mentioned, they're due on June 14th. We expect to send out a list of the nominated and new submissions by June 28th. The existing and new priorities will be voted upon between June 28th and July 26th. The rankings will be sent out to participants on August 2nd. And then at that point, registrants will have an opportunity to suggest solutions. And then we will hold the residue study rankings and discussion on September 26th. And then after that, we'll hold ongoing discussions, because sometimes things change through the process and we discover potentially additional solutions. Sometimes companies have not maybe completely vetted the process. They may discover they already have a sufficient number of residues. So we consider all these factors, and it's a continual process. And then until we start to develop protocols and start to initiate actual projects. Next slide, please. So this is my contact information. If you have any questions, as I mentioned, this presentation, as well as a video version, will be posted on the Minor Use Foundation website. I hope I can hear your questions, or if necessary, or I hope I can see them in the chat.
Muchísimas gracias, Michael.
So I can only hear you in Spanish, Luis.
Thank you very much, Michael. Luis, I can only hear you in Spanish, unfortunately. What was the comment of Dr. Braverman? You're hearing me in Spanish, you said?
Michael, tenemos una serie de preguntas.
Michael, we have a series of questions, more than anything, clarifications regarding the information that was provided. And I can assure you that people like me, who are of a certain age, you know, who come from another time, sometimes we don't manage our computers that well. And, you know, it was, that's just to say that your presentation was extremely clear regarding the nomination process. So maybe you could show the slide before last, which showed the different dates. I think that was very important. No, I think it's two after that, where the dates appear here. Perfect. It's in Portuguese for some reason. I don't know if there's any way if you can show the slide in Spanish.
Creo que entendemos el portuñol, como decimos
I mean, we understand Portuguese, but the deadline to nominate priorities is June 14th, 2022. So it's in a month.
Y entonces se enviaría
So we would be sending out the list of nominated priorities and new submissions by June 28th. Please, for all the participants, this goes to all participants, we will be sharing these presentations, and by participating in this process, you need to really bear in mind these dates and deadlines. So between June 28th and July 26th,
y aquí hay una pregunta también al doctor.
This is a question actually for Mr. Braverman regarding who can vote priorities. And the ranking will be sent to participants August 12th. And for this year, so the final selection would take place within these dates to establish the priorities for Latin America and the Caribbean. There are a series of questions that I would like to ask.
Los criterios para elegir cultivos de usos menores.
First, the criteria to define minor use crops. I think that the definition still needs further clarification. There is a definition by the EPA in the United States.
Si podrían poner, por favor,
please, to all participants, if you can please silence your microphones if you're not taking the floor. The criteria to consider a crop to be minor is something I think that needs further clarification. So maybe you can share your comments or your experience regarding what it means to have a minor crop, what the definition is. Please, Michael?
Yes. I heard you just say my name in English, but everything that I've heard previous is I've only heard in Spanish.
Michael, he's just asking if you could define what is a minor use.
Oh, well, as we mentioned earlier on in the, I think it was Anna Gore that kind of covered that. It's really, and I think Luis mentioned as well, it really depends on where you are in the world. But we focus primarily on fruit, vegetable, nut crops, herbs. Those are the crops we tend to focus on. we tend not to focus on things like corn, soybeans, rice, crops that are grown extensively over large acreages with relatively low input. So essentially, for the purposes of the nomination, I would suggest, focusing on horticultural crops.
If they have a question, Michael, about whether something is qualified as a minor use, should they just direct it to you?
That would be fine.
Ana, ¿desearías?
Ana, do you want to add anything else?
No, I mean, I think Michael covered it. I liked what you had said earlier, Luis, that minor uses, the definition can change depending on where you are. And so we tend to think about minor uses in the global sense, understanding that these crops can be quite economically important, and there can be quite a bit of production in the countries that we're talking about, and they also can have great cultural significance. But we tend to define them on as they would be defined globally, minor uses.
Okay. Thank you, Anna. And Michael, I have switched to the English channel, so maybe you can follow my questions. The second one is also about a clarification. There was a comment about who can enter and provide a nomination before or up to June the 14th. Is it like a free entry? Any person can? And there's a related question from industry about the role of industry in the nomination process. Yeah.
Okay, so as far as nominating priorities, in other words, the crop pest combination, it should only be from the public sector. In other words, can be somebody that works for a government, could be a grower, growers group, essentially any industry associated with agricultural production that is not the manufacturer of pesticides.
Okay.
And as far as, and I wasn't sure if there was another part about question about industry. So again, we will be getting these nominations and voting on the nominations, and then they will be ranked and sent out on August 2nd. Now, by August 2nd, that is when we will be requesting the industry for suggestions for solutions to those crop and pest combinations.
Thank you so much, Michael. And it's important to denote that the role of industry is important, because once the nominations are done, then we're going to have to find solutions that could be supported by industry as well, correct?
Absolutely. And, I mean, you also think of it a different way. Right now, we already have over 3,000 priorities. I don't think industry would want to go through 3,000 priorities and make solutions for 3,000 different crop pest combinations. So it makes sense that they'd be able to focus on the ones that are already ranked, which will be, we expect a much smaller subset. And once they see the ranked ones, then they can decide which ones they think they have solutions for. But absolutely, we can't really progress on developing residue data without the assistance of industry, because we depend on industry for the test substance, analytical standards, the registration, and the label.
Thank you, Michael. There was another question that I thought it was quite interesting. because you mentioned the participation of the public sector in the nomination process. But there was a comment about the participation of universities or academic institutions that you know very well do a lot of research on pest control issues concerning agriculture in their respective countries. So any comments with respect to the participation of the academic institutions?
Yes, certainly. Universities are very welcome to make nominations.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then I will also ask the same question to Rogerio, because I think the initial question was actually addressed to the Brazilian minor use program. But maybe Rogerio, if you're still connected.
Yes.
The question that was directed to Brazil was about the role that universities play in your minor use program in Brazil.
Ok. Universidades e centros de pesquisa, tal como a Embrapa.
The research centers, such as Embrapa, they work as a group, and the group works in a way as a council. In this council, they identify whether the active ingredient works in a certain crop, and that's where they can provide this type of research study. They can also indicate and establish priorities. Which ones are the assets that need to be prioritized? Therefore, universities and research centers are definitely involved in the activity because they can provide a lot of major contributions in these crop pest combinations and the active ingredient that controls that pest.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
Was I able to answer your question?
Yes. And again, as what Michael indicated, the participation of the universities is highly encouraged because they are probably the ones doing a lot of the field research and knowledge working with the farmers as well. Yeah. I have a second related question to both Dr. Michael Braverman and Ingeniero Rogerio Pereira. And that relates to the whether, I think the question was addressed to Brazil to begin with, as to whether you have adopted or, conducted or established an MRL for a minor crop use in Brazil, but by the fact that you're extrapolating data, and once the chemical or the product is applied in the field, you find that there might be a problem, talking basically about an exceedance of the MRL. So whether you have had that experience and what would you do about it? Obviously, I would also ask Michael, because we know we have a lot of experience within EPA as well, or in the United States. So Ingeniero Rogerio, have you had any case in Brazil in which you adopted or an MRL extrapolating data and you might find that there was an exceedance of the MRL? Has to do the post-registration component, yeah.
Ok, eu estou nessa área há pouco tempo.
I would say that I'm in this area. I haven't been in this area for a long time, so I don't have a long history, I must admit. I started working specifically in this activity 4 months ago. However, I can say that in the Ministry of Agriculture and in Anvisa, which is the institution focusing on health, they do conduct ongoing and periodical analysis in the crops. And if we identify an issue, such as the one you mentioned, the appropriate measures are taken to solve these problems. We have monitoring programs in place to conduct a follow-up. That's all I can answer for now.
Thank you, Ingeniero. Michael, would you like to have any comments about that? I can also comment
Sure.
based on the EPA experience, but
Yeah. So first of all, when we set up residue studies, we always try to go with the highest rate that we expect to be used, the maximum number of applications, the minimum interval between each application, and the minimum pre-harvest interval that is acceptable by the company and based on the risk assessment. So in most cases, we don't expect exceedances unless somebody is not following the label. Most likely, if somebody is not meeting the pre-harvest interval, which can cause exceedances. But in most cases, we don't find that to be an issue. As far as adopting MRLs from elsewhere, you also have to consider what the use pattern is and whether or not you're using the same use pattern. So in other words, if an MRL, let's say, was developed in Australia and they have a label in Australia and they developed an MRL, well, you could probably meet that MRL as long as you follow the same use pattern as in Australia. But if you develop or need a higher rate or more frequent applications for Latin America, you run a risk of exceeding that MRL.
mm-hmm. Yeah, in my experience, Michael, and I hope you agree, is that we find that it's very unusual that we will have an exceedance. There will have to be significant differences in the gap or the label directions of use in countries to find cases in which there might be exceedances. And when the submission is made to the Codex JMPR, we probably will submit them with the worst case scenario, which is the highest concentration, doses, number of applications, the shortest PHI, many different factors to account for the maximum likelihood of an MRL. Correct?
Right. The main problems with exceeding MRLs are disharmonization of MRLs between different countries, not exceeding an MRL that is based on data. Mm-hmm. Okay. On the data itself.
Okay. Michael, maybe one final question. I thought it was very important. There was a comment about, okay, once we go through the nomination process and we select the priorities, the chemicals that are selected, how will that process work, and whether there will be restriction in the selection of some chemical tools that could be tested in the field residue studies or the magnitude of residue studies?
Okay, well, unless Shannon tells me wrong, I don't think we can stop anybody from making any suggestions as far as a chemical, or a particular potential solution. However, if we see, real old chemistry on, and that's the only suggestion, and, we don't have any other options, we might consider it, but we definitely prefer to go with newer chemistry. Again, as I described, when we go into the workshop, we're going to have the rankings of those particular crop pest combinations, as well as the potential solutions. So if we have a crop pest combination and somebody is suggesting chlorpyrifos, we're going to have a lot more trouble potentially funding that than somebody that has a different, either a different solution that is a newer chemistry or a different priority which has a newer solution. So if there are older chemistries that we have concerns, making it through the review process, we would tend not to go forward with those. And we would seek out, as I mentioned, it's a continual process. Sometimes, we may put a priority aside, and then we will discover later that, hey, maybe there's an additional active ingredient that just came out that the registrant might be interested in utilizing for a particular priority.
I think based, Michael, on the EPA experience is that we know certain chemistries that we're not going to be pursuing because of their high mammalian toxicity and other factors. Yeah, but in line with the objectives and vision of the Minor Use Foundation, IR4, and probably many of the agencies, regulatory agencies in the Latin American countries, our goal is also to pursue safer pest control tools. That's probably the key. So I would say rest assured for the person that submitted that comment that we're not going to be pursuing all chemistries for the most part. Yeah. Okay. Unless it's absolutely necessary. Yeah. Might be a case, but okay. All right. Very good.
If somebody, magically discovers that, there's an older chemistry that will work on Fusarium race 4 in banana, I think we might consider that, but that's not likely.
Okay, Michael, thank you very much. And we appreciate the comments. For the participants, if there are additional questions, please put them in the chat. We'll try to respond. We're taking notes of all the comments and all of that, so that we'll try to respond by submitting that. There was another question that will probably go to IICA and the organizers, that the participants wanted to have copies of the presentations, and I think that's going to be available, either through the Minor Use Foundation website, the IICA, or the IR4. I don't know, Michael, whether the IR4 will actually place. Dirk, I think you're saying the Minor Use Foundation, and
it would be on the Minor Use Foundation. But if somehow somebody has trouble accessing that and wants my presentation, they can send me an email.
Okay. So the goal, Luis, is to put the presentations on the Minor Use Foundation website, because the website is the vehicle for nominating, for voting, and for collection of the information that the process is going to uncover. So being familiar with the website, how to use it, it's a logical place for us to put the presentations from today. So please look for them there first. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. I'm going to switch back to the Spanish one.
Okay.
Yeah. Muchas gracias, Dr. Michael Braverman, ingeniero.
Thank you, Dr. Michael Braverman, Engineer Rogerio Pereira Da Silva, for your comments. We have one last presentation by a dear colleague of mine, Dr. Jason Sandahl. Rumors say that Jason and I have visited more countries together than those we have visited with our wives. I hope Jason can verify my comment, but Dr. Jason Sandahl worked for many years at the FAS, the Foreign Agriculture Service of the United States, and is currently a farmer himself, and CEO of his consultancy company known as Agaline Global. So for me, it is a honor to introduce my colleague, Dr. Jason Sandahl, who will refer to projects associated to this, to the programs developed by the Minor Use Foundation. Dr. Jason Sandahl is also a member of the board of directors of the Minor Use Foundation. So go ahead, Dr. Sandahl. Jason?
Okay, thank you, Luis. And yes, I can confirm that we definitely have traveled more together than with our own wives, not just more countries, but if you put all the days together, I think that's true as well. So be ready soon, Luis. I'll probably ask you on my next honeymoon together. So thank you for the kind introduction. So I just want to switch gears just a little bit. I want to talk about a different project, but they're related to what Michael and the Minor Use Foundation has been presenting today. We have a project that we have been thinking about and we're ready to initiate it. And the title of it is Latin America Pesticide Residue Mitigation through the promotion of biopesticides and other integrated pest management control options for the enhancement of agricultural trade options. It's a very long title, but this one we are hoping will be funded by the Standard and Trade Development Facility, known as STDF. And next slide, please. There we go. And the objective of this new project is going to be the promotion. I'll just read it here and then I'll explain. To promote the use of biopesticides and other pest control options on export crops in Latin America and the Caribbean to improve compliance with pesticide MRLs and facilitate agricultural trade. In other words, what we're trying to do is mitigate residue issues in trade by replacing conventional pesticides at the end of the growing season with biopesticide alternatives. So we're going to use conventionals just up until the last application or two of the growing season, in which those are the applications that usually contribute the most to the residues on the crop, and then replacing them with non-residue pest control tools such as biopesticides, but we're not eliminating, or we're not restricting that to only biopesticides, but it could be other chemical pesticides that are not going to have residue problems. Now, this project and this research is going to require a better understanding of decline curves of the conventional pesticides in order to meet trade partner MRLs. And we need to define then that pre-harvest interval from the decline curves. And we're going to use a biopesticide during that PHI, or that interval, to help protect the crop through the rest of the harvest. Okay, next slide, please. So we have several countries committed to joining the project so far, which are listed here. There's quite a few of them. I think there's 12 total or so. And we also have some key partners that have been identified to help us through this project. So we have Argentina, Paraguay, Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala so far as our countries that we're working with. We also have a Crop Life, the Association Colombia de, I can't pronounce it, Buenísimos. And then also the Passiflora Association in Colombia. But then also, I forgot to include the Dominican Republic, and that's to be determined. We are trying to get the Dominican Republic included in this proposal, and we'll see how that goes. But these are the participating countries that we have so far and the partners. Okay, next slide, please. So this project was actually in a couple phases. For the STDF, they usually like to have what's called a project preparation grant, PPG. And those are very small amounts of funding to help get a project up and running before they would like to have a full proposal submitted. So from 2021 until 2022, so just about a year period, we had a very small grant from the STDF to help develop this project and to get a full proposal together and to get some basic concepts and partnerships established to initiate it. The second phase of the project is hopefully going to be from 2022 till 2025. And that part, we have just submitted the proposal to the STDF earlier this month or late last month. And we are waiting for the review to happen now. But hopefully it will be funded and we'll be initiating and kicking off the whole project very soon. Next slide, please. So this project that I'm mentioning, it has several components to it. Some of them are focusing more on biopesticide capacity building, such as the training that we have under the outputs, some regulatory frameworks, and technical transfer of information and knowledge. So those are some of the ones that are related, but the kind of the core of the project, which I need to address here at this meeting today, really involves the research component, which I mentioned were including decline studies and bioefficacy research. Then also developing a broader strategy to support minor uses in the region. And again, supporting the work of the Minor Use Foundation and this priority setting process. So these are the two keys, pieces that we'll be addressing here. Next slide. So under the original project preparation grant that I mentioned, the PPG from 2021 to 2022, we were able to identify some crops with what I'm going to call problematic residues in trade, and also some pests that are problematic targets. So what I meant by problematic is these are chemicals that are causing problems in trade, residue issues. And so we have some of them identified, and what we need to do then is to help identify some pest control options for them. And we've categorized these MRL issues into a few different scenarios, which I'll talk about in a second. But this first table, it has the problem where there is some conventional MRLs, but they often exceed the limits in trade. So for example, chlorpyrifos in plantain, there might be some MRLs in the export markets, but our participating countries find that when they use the chlorpyrifos or the metacloprid or the pyrethroids, if they're using them according to their label or the way that they would need to use them in their country, they are facing some MRL violations in the export markets. So this is one kind of a category that we are going to try to work on, is trying to eliminate or reduce the residues of those chemical pesticides with some sort of biopesticide or other conventional alternative. Okay, next slide, please. In this other scenario, these pesticides have no MRLs in the destination markets. So for example, again, with coffee and chlorpyrifos, there's potentially no MRLs in the export market. So we need to, again, find some way to mitigate the residues of those chemicals so that they are not detected in the export market. Okay, next slide, please. And here, under this third case, we have some conventional chemical control options that are available in the countries, which can also help mitigate some of the residues. but they might need to have some regulatory support to register for the crops without necessarily having the need to look for biopesticide alternatives. But each of these three different scenarios that I've listed, we put them there because we might need to have a different sort of approach to how we address them. Okay, next slide, please. There's one more slide. There we go. Oh, almost there we are. Okay, so what is expected? Okay. So what we're requesting here now is some help identifying either some biopesticide or, I don't know how to explain it, but maybe low residue profile, conventional alternatives to those quote unquote problematic conventionals that I had in the table on the right. And we hope to leverage the platform that Michael and the Minor Use Foundation have created to get inputs from this group. Because we see it as kind of they're different projects altogether, but it's really going to be the same sort of stakeholders and the same sort of interests involved. So we're trying to just piggyback on this effort that the Minor Use Foundation and Michael have started. And we are looking to have a second day of the priorities workshop, which Michael and the foundation will have on the 26th of September. But we want to focus a second day afterwards on the 27th to discuss some of those alternatives for the biopesticide for our project. That's all I have to say here. And then I want to hand it over to Adriana, who's going to take over the second half of this discussion now, or the presentation, because she's going to explain how you can view the priorities that we have identified already, and that we're looking for some biopesticide or other conventional alternatives. So Adriana, I'm going to hand it over to you for the second half. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Jason. Solamente quería añadir.
Thank you, Jason. Allow me to just add that Dr. Adriana Castañeda is also an officer of the Minor Use Foundation. Adriana, go ahead. Thank you, Luis. I hope that the interpreters can hear me. Yes. And follow me. Fine, thank you. As Jason was saying, we will take advantage of this wonderful opportunity today with the participation of all of you to receive nominations and submit solutions for the priorities we have already developed for the project. This will be done through the Minor Use Foundation website. You can see it here on the screen. To the right-hand side, it says Submit Solutions. Click on that. And the website. On the website, you will see the priorities, as opposed to what Michael was just explaining. Here, there are about 30 different priorities. Fortunately, there are about 30 different priorities that we already have. And these priorities are crops, pests, pesticide that are causing issues. Here we see the type of table. After that, once you select your profile or submit solutions, you will see this screen. So on this screen, you can select language, Spanish, Portuguese, English,
Igualmente que en la otra página.
As well as on the other page. We will find name, address, email, organization, country. Then you will see a list that will pop down with the list of priorities selected, as we will see now. We have the crop, the pest, and the pesticide that may be causing residue problems. You can nominate 3 types of solutions. Chemical solutions. So you list the active ingredient, if there is efficacy data available, and if there should be any article, any brochure, any bit of information that you would like to upload. The next type of solution would be the biological solution. Asking what the solution is, the active ingredient, whether there are efficacy data available, if there are related documents that can be uploaded. The third option is the existence of integrated pest management solutions. What type of active ingredients are, if there are efficacy data and documents. And at the bottom, submit. With this, I end my presentation. That was short. Thank you. Thank you very much, Doctor. We are reaching basically the end of this workshop. I believe there are no questions or comments, but anyway, I would just like to share the following information with you. I would like to thank Shannon McNamara from the Minor Use Foundation and from IR4 also. In the chat, she entered a link with all the presentations that have shared so far in the workshop. Take note of that. Are there final questions? First, a question from Michael. Are you still connected? Yes. Michael, in your presentation, you said there's a video. I wonder whether I heard that right. Is there a video available that could be accessed?
Luis, I'm not sure if Michael's on anymore.
Michael.
Yeah, I'm here, but I could only hear Luis. Whatever you said, I only heard you in Spanish.
Okay, my apologies, Michael. I think if I heard well during the presentation, you indicated that there was a video available that we can access. Is that still the case, or did I misheard that comment that you made?
Shannon, you're the one who's making that video. Is that correct, Shannon?
Okay, Shannon McNamara has raised her hand. Shannon?
Hi there. So, yes, so there is a video available that shows step-by-step instructions for nominating priorities. It's embedded on the page with the priority nominating instructions.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Shannon. Appreciate it. Nice seeing you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. So now we're reaching the conclusion of the workshop. I hope that you found this workshop to be very productive, as I have. I thank all of the participants, all of the experts, and I also would like to thank especially IICA, Erick Bolaños and his team, Maria Fallas, for the logistical arrangements and your continued support of the activities of the Minor Use Foundation and the IR4 in the Latin American region. I would like to also thank the participants. I hope you found this workshop to be of value. To me, it is very important for the Latin American agricultural landscape. And before closing, I would like to invite Dr. Dirk Drost from the Minor Use Foundation for the closing remarks. And appreciate and seeing so many of you that I've known for so many years. Yes. So Dr. Drost, for your final comments and concluding this workshop.
First of all, let me thank you, Dr. Suguiyama, for your moderating today and for your leadership in the meeting and the conversations. I think everyone will join me in thanking you for the wonderful work that you did. So thank you so much. To IICA and the IICA team, I'm honored to be able to share the meeting with you folks today. You're very professional. You've done an excellent job, and we're very grateful for the work you've done. To my colleagues at the Minor Use Foundation, thank you very much for the effort and intent, for the clarity and simplicity. And last but not least, to our participants in Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you so much for joining. At maximum, we had over 130 people participating, and we still have retained over 110. So if you have questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to address them to me or to Luis or to Erick Bolaños, and we'll definitely respond. Once again, thank you so much and have a wonderful day. Back to you, Luis.
Muchísimas gracias, Dr. Drost.
Thank you very much, Dr. Drost. And with those comments, we end our workshop. Thank you all very much. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care. Please take care, everyone. Thank you.